Tonight, let the world grow quiet. Before sleep finds you, step back into an age where God still walked among men, where fate was woven by unseen hands, and a single choice could echo for generations. This is not a tale of heroes and victories. It is a story of endings, of cities that burned, of gods who faded, and of myths that refused to die. Close your eyes. Breathe slowly. And allow the ancient world to carry you gently into the night. Good night, and welcome to Noctivara Stories. Wherever you are in the world tonight, I'm grateful that you've chosen to be here, at the very beginning of this journey. Take a slow breath in, and let it go. Allow the weight of the day to loosen its hold, and settle gently into the quiet. Tonight marks the first story of this channel, and we begin where so many stories begin, before history, before memory, in the ancient shadows of Greek mythology. A world shaped by gods and fate, by whispers of prophecy and the long echo of legends. Let this be a place to rest your mind, to drift, and to listen, as we step back to a time before time. Before there was Olympus crowned with gods, before land rose firm beneath the feet of mortals, before the sea learned its tides or the sky learned its stars, there was only chaos. Not chaos as we now understand it, not madness, noise, or disorder, but something far older and far stranger. Chaos was the first state of existence, a vast and endless emptiness. A yawning void without shape, purpose, or direction. It was not evil, nor kind, nor indifferent. It did not judge or choose. It simply existed. From this boundless nothingness, the earliest forces of reality began to stir. First came Gaia, the earth, solid, fertile, and enduring, a foundation upon which all things would one day rest. Beneath her formed Tartarus, the deep abyss, darker and more terrible than any cave or chasm, a place not yet of punishment, but of raw depth and shadow. Alongside them arose Eros, the unseen power of attraction and desire, the force that would draw beings together and allow creation to continue. These were not gods as later ages would imagine them. They were truths given form, principles woven into the fabric of existence. From chaos also emerged Nyx, the embodiment of night. She moved wrapped in shadow so dense that even the void seemed to retreat before her. With her came Erebus, the deep darkness of the underworld. Together, in the silence of the early cosmos, night and darkness gave birth to Ether, the bright upper air breathed by the immortals, and Hemera, the living day. From the moment of her birth, Hemera was fated to follow her mother endlessly, chasing night across the heavens. Thus, long before reason or science, myth explained the cycle of darkness and light as a family bound by eternal motion. Gaia, the earth, was never idle. Patient and endlessly fertile, she shaped life from herself alone. From her body she formed Uranus, the sky, vast, star-filled, and all-encompassing. He arched over her, stretching across the heavens, becoming both her sun and her eternal counterpart. With sky above and earth below, the world found its first true shape. Gaia also brought forth the mountains, rising tall and untamed, and Pontus, the restless sea, whose waters surged with will and motion long before ships or monsters disturbed their depths. United, earth and sky became the first great cosmic pair. From their union came the Titans, the first generation of mighty rulers who would govern the universe long before Zeus or the Olympians claimed power. There were 12 Titans in all, 6 sons and 6 daughters, each embodying vast and elemental forces. Oceanus, the endless river encircling the world. Hyperion, lord of heavenly light. Coeus, seeker of hidden knowledge. Crius, keeper of the constellations. Iapetus, forefather of mortal humanity. And Cronus, the youngest, quiet, calculating, and ambitious beyond measure. Among the daughters were Thea, whose brilliance would birth the sun and moon, Rhea, destined to become the mother of gods, Themis, living embodiment of divine law, Mnemosyne, keeper of all memory, Phoebe, radiant and prophetic, and Tessis, the nourishing force behind rivers and seas. Yet Gaia's womb held more than beauty and order. She also bore children of terrifying power. First came the Cyclopes, Brontes, Steropes, and Arges, each with a single blazing eye set in the center of their brow. Strong, unrefined, and fearless, they were masters of fire and lightning. After them came the Hecatoncheirs, giants of unimaginable scale, each with 100 arms and 50 heads, capable of shaking the foundations of the cosmos when angered. Uranus, though ruler of the sky, recoiled at these monstrous offspring. Where Gaia saw strength, he saw threat. Ashamed and afraid, he forced the Cyclopes and the 100-handed ones back into Gaia's depths, imprisoning them within the earth itself. Layer upon layer of stone sealed them away, hidden from light and sound. Gaia cried out beneath their weight. The earth, once nurturing and free, now became a prison. Each breath brought pain, each moment a reminder of betrayal. And from that suffering, a quiet resolve began to take shape. Gaia would not forget. She would not forgive. But the reckoning she prepared, one that would shatter sky and throne alike, is a tale that unfolds next. They would not forget. And yet, Cronus did not stand alone. When the first thunder of rebellion rolled across the heavens, the Titans gathered to him. Brothers and sisters alike assembled upon Mount Arthries, the ancient seat of power in the southern lands. Oceanus remained apart, encircling the world in silence, too distant, or too wise, to stain his waters with kinslaying blood. But the others answered the call. Coeus, Crius, Hyperion, and Iapetus armed themselves, ancient and unyielding. Thus began the war poets would later name the Titanomachy, the clash between Titans and Olympians. It was not a single battle, but a decade of unending destruction. For 10 long years, heaven and earth were torn apart. Storms choked the sky, thunder shook the mountains, and fire rained down upon a world still young enough to fear its creators. The Titans held Mount Arthries, scarred and weathered by ages past, while Zeus and his siblings made their stand upon Mount Olympus, a peak still untouched by the full weight of war. The struggle knew no mercy. Lightning split the heavens open. Seas rose in fury and swallowed islands whole. Mountains cracked, volcanoes bled molten fire, and winds screamed like living things across the land. Time itself seemed to stall, caught between two powers neither willing nor able to yield. Yet Gaia, ever watchful, knew that strength alone would not decide the war. The balance could not tip while ancient power remained buried. Once more, she whispered to Zeus, guiding him toward what had long been denied. Victory, she told him, lay not in force, but in what Cronus had feared most. Zeus descended into Tartarus, into the deepest shadows beneath the world, and there he broke the chains that bound his monstrous uncles. The Cyclopes were freed at last, their single eyes burning with gratitude and long-suppressed fire. In return, they forged gifts worthy of kings. To Zeus, they gave the thunderbolt, raw skybound power shaped into judgment. To Poseidon, they granted the trident, with which the seas would rise or fall at his command. And to Hades, they offered a helm of darkness, a veil that rendered its wearer unseen. The 100-handed ones followed, giants of ancient rage, hurling mountains like stones, shaking the earth with every step. When they entered the war, the tide turned. The Olympians surged forward with a force the Titans could no longer withstand. Cronus fought fiercely, proud and defiant to the last. But prophecy, once spoken, does not soften with time. One by one, the Titans were driven down, cast from their high places and stripped of dominion. Zeus did not destroy them. Instead, he mirrored the cruelty of the past. Deep into Tartarus they were thrown, bound in unbreakable chains, sealed behind bronze gates that would never rust nor yield. Only a few were spared, Prometheus and Epimetheus, who had sided with the gods, and the Mys, who foresaw justice in the new order. Thus ended the age of the Titans. The sky cleared. The scarred world began, slowly, to breathe again. The throne passed to Zeus, not by birth, but by strength, cunning, and fate fulfilled. Yet even as he claimed the heavens, the echo of Cronus's curse lingered behind him, a reminder that no power is ever beyond challenge. When the war ended and silence returned to the land, the victors stood amid the ruins of creation. The Titans groaned in Tartarus, their voices swallowed by the abyss. The old order lay broken. But conquest is simpler than rule, and the gods soon faced a greater task. The world was vast, wild, and filled with forces yet unnamed. No single ruler could hold it alone. Zeus stood at the center of this new age. Though not the eldest by birth, he was first in power, first in action, and first in vision. Yet ancient law, older than stone, denied him sole dominion. His brothers stood beside him, Poseidon, whose wrath churned the seas, and Hades, who had walked unseen through war and shadow alike. All three had earned their claim. And so they cast lots, guided not by quarrel but by fate. When the lots fell, the world was divided. Zeus claimed the sky and the wide heavens, becoming lord of storm and thunder. Poseidon took the seas, the rivers, and every hidden spring. Hades received the underworld, the realm of the dead, ruling with stern and unyielding order. The earth itself remained shared ground, a realm between realms, where gods might walk and mortals might glimpse them. Thus the world was ordered, sky, sea, and underworld, and the brothers swore never to war against one another, lest creation itself shatter anew. Upon Mount Olympus, higher than cloud and storm, Zeus gathered the gods. There stood Hera, queen and sovereign, proud and unforgetting. Demeter, bringer of harvest and growth. Hestia, keeper of hearth and home. Athena, born of wisdom and war. Apollo and Artemis, radiant twins of light and hunt. Ars, god of battle. Hephaestus, master of forge and flame. Aphrodite, born of sea foam and desire. Hermes, swift-footed herald between worlds. So began the age of Olympus, a new order born from fire and fate. Yet even then, beneath the calm of the heavens, the seeds of pride, love, and conflict waited patiently. For the gods, like mortals, could never escape the stories that followed power. Winged sandals brushed the ground at his heels, and a knowing smile never left his face. On the very day of his birth, before his steps were steady or his voice fully formed, Hermes committed his first great mischief. He stole the sacred cattle of Apollo, masked the crime with song and clever lies, and by the time the truth was uncovered, had already made himself impossible to punish. Wit was his shield, speed his weapon. In this way, he claimed his place among the gods before he could even walk. Hermes became the messenger of Olympus, the swift thread binding sky, earth, and underworld. He guided lost souls, watched over travelers on lonely roads, and smiled upon thieves and tricksters alike. Wherever he passed, borders lost their meaning. Paths crossed, rules bent, and certainty dissolved. This was the Olympian court, not a gathering of saints, but of forces. Immense, flawed, radiant, and dangerous. They argued as siblings do, chose sides in mortal struggles, loved fiercely, betrayed bitterly, and clashed in rivalries both petty and catastrophic. Yet above all else, they ruled. From the heights of Olympus, they watched the world below and shaped its fate with passing glances and careless decrees. The age of the Titans had ended, but in its place rose an era of divine stories, of gods who walked among mortals, of heroes born from their unions, and of a world forever altered by immortal hands. The world now had rulers, but peace, as always, was fragile. Fate had not yet spoken its final word. Long before cities of marble rose or prayers were carved into stone, there were no humans upon the earth. The gods ruled alone. Their courts glittered high upon Olympus, while the world below lay green, wild, and untamed. Mountains stood silent. Beasts roamed freely. But there were no hands to shape the soil, no voices to sing to the stars, no fire to push back the cold of night. It was Prometheus, Titan of the old blood, who first imagined humanity. He was no ally of Cronus, nor was he counted among those hurled into Tartarus. During the Great War, he sided with Zeus, not out of devotion, but foresight. Prometheus carried the burden of prophecy, and he knew where the storm would break. His name meant forethought, and never had a name fit more perfectly. His brother Epimetheus, afterthought, was his opposite in every way. Where Epimetheus acted first and regretted later, Prometheus paused, questioned, and weighed every choice. He stood between worlds, Titan and Olympian, old order and new, a thinker in a cosmos ruled by raw power. It was Prometheus who shaped mankind. Some say he molded them from river clay, smoothing earth into limbs and faces. Others claim he formed them in the image of the gods, upright and thoughtful, capable of invention and wonder. However it was done, humanity was born fragile, soft-skinned, slow, without claws or fangs, without fur or flame. They shivered beneath open skies, helpless before winter and beast alike. Prometheus pitied them. He climbed to Olympus and pleaded for a gift, something to raise mortals above mere survival. Zeus refused. He saw not promise in mankind, but danger. Having only just claimed his throne, the king of gods feared new powers growing beneath him. Let mortals live, he said, but let them fear. Fire was the right of immortals alone, the hearth of Hestia, the forge of Hephaestus, the thunder of Zeus. But Prometheus would not yield. In secret, he stole a spark from the divine forge and hid it within a hollow fennel stalk. He carried it down from Olympus and placed it in mortal hands. Fire bloomed beneath the stars. Darkness retreated. Smoke curled into the night sky. With flame came warmth, safety, craft, metal, language, and defiance. Humanity began to build. Zeus soon discovered the theft. His wrath was swift and cold. To punish mankind, he ordered the creation of a gift, beautiful and terrible. Hephaestus shaped her from clay. Aphrodite gave her beauty. Hermes granted her cunning. Athena clothed her in shimmering silver. Her name was Pandora, the all-gifted. She carried with her a sealed jar, later misnamed a box, filled with every sorrow the gods could devise. Epimetheus, ignoring his brother's warnings, welcomed her. And when curiosity overcame restraint, the jar was opened. Disease, grief, madness, envy, and death poured into the world like smoke from a long-sealed fire. Only hope remained within, a faint light amid despair. Prometheus's punishment followed. Zeus ordered him bound to a remote mountain at the edge of the world. There, chained in unbreakable bonds, An eagle descended each day to feast upon his liver. Each night it healed. Each dawn the torment began anew. Immortal suffering without end. Yet Prometheus did not repent. He held a secret Zeus feared, that one day the king of gods would fall by his own bloodline. And so Prometheus endured, unbroken. Beneath Olympus, humanity struggled and rose. Their lives were brief beside immortal memory, yet they shaped the world through suffering and will. Later poets would look back and divide human history into ages. It was Hesiod who named them gold, silver, bronze, heroic, and iron. The Golden Age came first, under the reign of Cronus. Men lived without pain or labor. The earth gave freely. There was no war, no law, no hunger. Death came like sleep, and their spirits became gentle guardians of the world. Then came the Silver Age, long-lived but foolish, arrogant, and impious. They refused the gods and were wiped away. After them rose the Bronze Age, born of ash trees and shaped by war. These men lived for battle, their lives forged in blood and bronze, until they destroyed themselves in endless conflict. They raised no cities of stone, left behind no verses, no statues carved to outlast them. When they vanished, they left only broken blades and fields stripped bare. Even the gods did not linger over their passing. They descended into the underworld without lament, without prayer, their names dissolving into silence. Yet decline is not always a straight descent. From the smoke and blood of the Bronze Age rose a brief and blazing interval, the Heroic Age. It was not a step downward, but a sudden flare of light before the coming dark. These mortals stood apart from all others. They were greater than those who came before, and unmatched by those who followed. Born of both divine blood and human flesh, they were demigods, shaped by Olympus and earth alike. They founded cities, crossed uncharted seas, and etched their names into the memory of the world. This was the age of Perseus and Heracles, of Theseus and Atalanta, of Jason and his Argonauts, of Hector, Achilles, and Odysseus. They fought monsters born of chaos, challenged foreign kings, and at last turned their weapons upon one another beneath the walls of Troy. Many fell young. Others vanished into obscurity. But their deeds endured, carried forward in song, in stone, and in whispered prayer. Some were granted rest beyond the world's edge, in the Isles of the Blessed, where heroes dwell in endless sunlight and peace. The heroic age burned bright, and because it burned so fiercely, it could not last. When it faded, it left the world changed. Then came the age Hesiod named his own, the Iron Age, the age in which we still endure. A time of labor and sorrow, of soil that resists the plough and lives weighed down by fear. Men toil from dawn until nightfall, raise children beneath the shadow of war and hunger, and age with aching bones and restless hearts. In this age, trust breaks easily, between friends, between kin, between guest and host. Justice no longer stands tall and radiant, but walks with lowered eyes. Oaths are spoken lightly. Lies multiply. And the gods, if they still watch, do so from a great and troubling silence. Mortals build towers and forget their ancestors. They chase wealth and power, cutting down the forests that once sheltered them. Yet even now, the Iron Age has not ended. People still build, still hope, still tell stories of a distant time when mortals were noble and gods walked openly among them. Perhaps that fragile hope is the one thing Zeus did not reclaim when Pandora opened the jar. Between the fading age of gods and the struggling age of men arose a generation unlike any other. These were the heroes, born not of clay alone, but of divine desire and mortal courage. Their lives were short, their fates often cruel, yet their names rolled through time like distant thunder. Among the first and greatest of them was Perseus, monster slayer, founder of kings, and herald of the heroic bloodline to come. His story did not begin with battle, but with fear and prophecy. His mother, Danae, was a princess of Argos, daughter of King Acrisius. Like many kings, Acrisius feared what he could not command. An oracle warned him that his daughter would bear a son destined to end his life. Such prophecies cannot be bargained with nor ignored. And so Acrisius chose cruelty over wisdom. He sealed Danae within a chamber of bronze, buried beneath the earth, hidden from gods and men alike. But walls have never held against fate. Zeus, laughing at mortal caution, slipped through the smallest of cracks as a shower of golden light. From that union, Perseus was conceived. When Acrisius discovered the child, he dared not kill him outright. Even tyrants fear divine retribution. Instead, he placed mother and infant in a wooden chest and cast them into the sea, trusting the waves to finish what he would not. But the sea has its own will. The chest drifted safely to the island of Seriphos, where a fisherman named Dictys hauled it ashore. He sheltered them, raised the boy as his own, and watched Perseus grow, strong, swift, and marked by destiny. But peace never stays long with those born to prophecy. The island's ruler, King Polydectes, desired Danae. Perseus stood between them, defiant and unyielding. Unable to strike the sun directly, the king turned to deceit. He announced a false wedding and demanded gifts from every man. Perseus, poor but proud, boasted that he would bring a prize greater than any other, the head of Medusa. It was a death sentence disguised as honor. Medusa, the only mortal among the Gorgons, was cursed with a gaze that turned flesh to stone. None who sought her had ever returned. But the gods, watching with interest, chose to intervene. Athena lent Perseus her polished shield, bright as a mirror. Hermes gifted him a curved blade and winged sandals and guided him to the Grey sisters who shared a single eye. Through cunning, Perseus took their eye and forced them to reveal the path to the nymphs. From them he gained the helm of Hades, granting invisibility, and a sacred sack to contain what must not be seen. At the edge of the world, where night clings to stone, Perseus found the Gorgons asleep. He dared not look directly. Guided by reflection alone, he struck. Medusa's head fell, and from her blood sprang Pegasus and Chryse, born in death. As her sisters wailed, Perseus vanished into shadow. On his return, he saved Andromeda from a sea-born monster and claimed her as his wife. When he reached Seriphos, Polydectes laughed, until Perseus revealed his prize. The king and his court became stone. Dictys ruled in his place. Yet fate still waited. At a funeral game, Perseus hurled a discus. It struck an old man in the crowd, Acrisius. The prophecy was fulfilled, not through hatred, but by chance. Thus the circle closed. Perseus lived on, not forever, but long enough for his name to endure. From his line would come Heracles. And from Heracles, the next great turning in the endless story of gods and men. If Perseus opened the age of heroes, then Heracles towered over it like a living mountain. His name rolled across the Greek world like distant thunder, spoken with or in palaces and whispered beside village fires. He was not simply strong. He was excess itself, caught between man and God, laughter and despair, glory and unbearable sorrow. He was the great-grandson of Perseus, born of Argive blood, and sired by Zeus himself. And though the gods would endow him with unmatched strength, they would also condemn him to a life of suffering. His very birth was shaped by deceit and time bent to divine will. Zeus, restless and desiring, set his gaze upon Alcmene, the faithful wife of the Theban commander Amphitryon. Disguised as her husband, the king of gods lay with her, stretching a single night into 3, as if even the hours themselves obeyed him. From Zeus came Heracles. From Amphitryon, a mortal twin, Iphicles, one divine, one human, bound together from the first breath. Hera saw all. She always did. From her high throne, she watched with cold resolve, knowing well what her husband's offspring could become. Even in the cradle, Heracles carried danger in his blood. To destroy him before legend could take root, Hera sent 2 serpents slithering into the nursery. But the infant reached out without fear and crushed them both in his fists. When the nurses rushed in, they found the child laughing amid the dead coils of fate. As he grew, Heracles was trained as any noble youth: music, archery, wrestling, chariotry. Yet no tutor could tame the wild fire within him. Strength clung to him like a storm cloud, and restlessness followed him wherever he went. In manhood, he found both joy and ruin. He married Megara, daughter of King Creon, and for a brief, fragile time, he lived in peace. He fathered children. He defended Thebes. He believed himself healed. Hera did not forget. She struck him not with blade or beast, but with madness. His mind clouded, his sight burned red, and in that frenzy he slaughtered his wife and sons with the very hands that had once shielded them. When the madness lifted, silence fell. Heracles stood amid the wreckage of his own life, and no god answered his cries. Seeking redemption, he journeyed to Delphi. There the oracle spoke in riddles, declaring that he must submit to King Eurystheus of Tiryns, his cousin, weaker in body, but greater in destiny. Only through obedience, humiliation, and suffering could Heracles cleanse his guilt. Thus began the 12 labors. First came the Nemean lion, whose hide no weapon could pierce. Heracles trapped it in its cave and crushed it with his bare hands, then flayed it with its own claw. The lion's skin became his armor, a second hide against the world. Next rose the Lernaean Hydra, its many heads regenerating with every strike. With the help of his nephew Iolaus, Heracles cauterized each wound, and from the immortal head he drew venom, dipping his arrows in death itself. He then pursued the Cyrenian hind, sacred to Artemis, chasing it for a year across mountains and rivers before capturing it alive, earning the goddess's stern but measured approval. The Erymanthian boar followed, wrestled into submission in snowbound peaks and dragged back in chains while Eurystheus cowered in terror. The Augean stables came next, no beast, but filth uncleaned for generations. Heracles rerouted rivers and washed the corruption away in a single day. Then came the Stymphalian birds, bronze-beaked horrors of the sky. With Athena's aid, he drove them into flight and struck them down. He captured the Cretan bull, maddened by divine fire, tamed the man-eating mares of Dimes by feeding them their cruel master, and faced the Amazons for the girdle of Queen Hippolyta, bloodshed born of Hera's lies. At the edge of the world, he stole the cattle of the triple-bodied Geryon, erecting the pillars of Heracles where land met ocean. When Eurystheus rejected 2 labors, more were added. He tricked Atlas and claimed the golden apples of the Hesperides. And finally, he descended into Hades itself, wrestling Cerberus, the 3-headed guardian of death, into submission and returning alive. Redemption was earned, but peace was not. Heracles' life ended not in battle, but betrayal. The poisoned blood of the centaur Nessus burned through him, smeared upon a tunic by his wife Deianira, who believed it a charm of love. As agony consumed him, Heracles built his own pyre. When the flames rose, Zeus claimed him. His mortal flesh burned away. The god remained. On Olympus, Heracles was welcomed as an immortal and wed to Hebe, goddess of youth. His suffering became the measure of heroism itself. If Heracles was the greatest hero, then Theseus was the most human. He was not merely a destroyer of monsters, but a shaper of order, a founder, a lawgiver, the living spirit of Athens. In him lived strength and reason side by side, the very balance his city would one day claim as its soul. Theseus was born of two fathers, Zeus, king of Athens, and Poseidon of the sea. His mother, Athena, lay with both in a single night, mortal and god entwined. Raised in Trojan, Theseus grew unaware of his heritage until the day he lifted the stone beneath which his father's sword and sandals lay hidden. Choosing danger over comfort, he traveled to Athens by land, facing terror after terror. Each foe he defeated mirrored his crime. Periphetes the club-bearer, Cines the pine-bender, Siren the cliff tyrant, Circean the wrestler, and Procrustes, slain by his own cruel measure. Thus Theseus arrived in Athens not as a prince, but as a proven king in spirit. Theseus did more than survive his journey, he purified it. Wherever he walked, danger fell away, and the roads grew safer behind him. By the time he reached Athens, the land itself seemed changed, as though it were preparing for something greater to rise. Yet when he arrived at the palace gates, King Zeus did not recognize the young man standing before him. Medea, now queen of Athens and still steeped in old and dangerous sorceries, saw the truth immediately. She sensed the blood of kings and heroes in Theseus and understood the threat he posed. Whispering poison into Zeus' ear, she urged him to kill the stranger before destiny could speak. A cup was prepared. Death waited quietly, but fate intervened. Before the cup touched his lips, Theseus revealed the sword and sandals taken from beneath the stone in Trojan. Recognition struck like lightning. Zeus held the cup aside and embraced his son before the stunned court. The palace echoed with joy, but as always in myth, joy was brief. Beyond Athens, an old wound festered. Years earlier, Athens had been defeated by Crete. As punishment, King Minos demanded a cruel tribute. Every 9 years, 7 young men and 7 maidens would be sent across the sea to be devoured by the Minotaur. This creature, half man, half bull, was no accident of nature, but the product of divine punishment and royal arrogance. Poseidon had once sent Minos a sacred bull from the sea, meant for sacrifice. Minos, proud and greedy, kept it. In response, the gods cursed his wife, Persephone, filling her with unnatural desire for the beast. From that union came Aston, the Minotaur, a living embodiment of shame and vengeance. It was sealed beneath the palace of Knossos in a labyrinth so complex that even its creator, Daedalus, feared it. When Theseus learned of the tribute, he did not hesitate. He volunteered to go, not as an offering, but as an executioner. Before leaving, he swore to his father that if he survived, his ship would return with white sails. If he died, the sails would remain black. In Crete, fate shifted once more. Ariadne, daughter of Minos and half-sister to the monster, saw Theseus and fell in love. Against her father, against her blood, she chose him. She gave him a simple gift, a thread, but within it lay salvation. With it came knowledge of the labyrinth's winding madness. That night, Theseus entered the maze. Stone turned endlessly into stone. Darkness swallowed sound. And at its heart waited the beast. The battle was brutal and silent, steel against horn, will against nightmare. In the end, Theseus stood alone, the Minotaur broken at his feet. Following the thread, he returned to the light. They fled Crete under cover of night, Theseus, Ariadne, and the freed Athenian youths, sailing into the open Aegean. But love, in Greek myth, is never allowed to remain whole. On the island of Naxos, Ariadne was abandoned. Some say Dionysus claimed her. Others say Theseus feared what a Cretan queen would mean for an Athenian throne. She awoke alone beneath foreign stars, her fate rewritten by silence. Grief followed him home. In sorrow or forgetfulness, Theseus failed to change the sails. From the cliffs of Athens, Aegeus saw black against the sea and believed his son dead. In despair, he leapt into the waves. The sea still bears his name. As king, Theseus did not rest. He united Attica, binding scattered villages into a single city-state. He established festivals, laws, and institutions. He was a hero not only of muscle, but of order. He fought beside Heracles against the Amazons and later descended into the underworld with his reckless friend Pirithous, seeking to steal Persephone herself. That journey ended in ruin. Pirithous was consumed by the earth, and Theseus was trapped upon the chair of forgetfulness, his memory slowly eroded by death's breath. Only Heracles, on his own descent, tore him free. But time turns against all kings. Athens eventually cast Theseus aside, weary of heroes and drawn toward new voices and philosophies. Exiled, he fled to Skyros, where a jealous king betrayed him, hurling him from a cliff. He died alone, no crown, no crowd. Only later would Athens reclaim his bones and honor him as its founder. Where Heracles embodied the power of the body, Theseus became the strength of the city, the law, the people, the idea of civilization itself. Long before Troy burned, and long after the Titans fell, another voyage began, one that would bind heroes together and scatter them in exile. This was the tale of Jason. Jason was a prince driven from his throne in infancy. His father, king of Iolcus, had been overthrown by his own brother, Peleus, a man who ruled through fear alone. Warned by prophecy, Peleus sought to kill the child. But Jason was smuggled away and raised in secret by the centaur Chiron, teacher of heroes. In the wild, Jason learned patience rather than rage. He grew strong not in war, but in endurance. When he returned to Iolcus, he arrived wearing only one sandal, lost while carrying an old woman across a river. The woman was Hera in disguise. Peleus knew the omen. Beware the man with one shoe. Feigning welcome, Peleus offered Jason a bargain. Retrieve the golden fleece from distant Colchis, and the throne would be his. Jason accepted. He gathered the greatest heroes of the age, Heracles, Orpheus, Atalanta, Castor and Pollux, Meleager, Theseus, and many more. 50 in all. Together they sailed aboard the Argo, a ship blessed by Athena herself, its prow carved from sacred oak that could speak. Their journey carried them through betrayal, prophecy, and terror, past the clashing rocks, through lands of sorcery and fire. At last, they reached Colchis, where King Aetes set impossible trials before Jason. Yoked fire-breathing bulls. Sown dragon's teeth. Warriors born from blood-soaked earth. Jason would have died there, but love intervened. Medea, daughter of Aetes and priestess of dark gods, was struck by divine passion. She betrayed her father, armed Jason with magic, and lulled the serpent guardian of the fleece into sleep. Jason seized the golden fleece, burning bright as the sun, and fled into the night with Medea at his side. And thus, destiny turned once more. Jason's fall, the curse of Thebes, and the road to Troy. Aetes did not let them go easily. Ships were launched in pursuit, oars biting into the black water. But the lovers had already crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Medea paid for their escape in blood. She took her younger brother, Apsitus, and cut him into pieces. One by one, she scattered them into the sea. Aetes was forced to stop, to gather what remained of his son for burial. Grief slowed vengeance. And in that terrible pause, the Argo vanished beyond the horizon, its wake marked by betrayal, magic, and irreversible sin. The journey home was no triumph. They wandered through cursed waters and hostile lands, past Scylla's snapping jaws and Charybdis' endless whirl. When at last they reached Iolcus, Jason found not a crown, but another deception. Peleus refused to step down. This time Medea's revenge was quiet and clever. She convinced Peleus' daughters that she could restore their father's youth. They cut him apart and boiled him alive, believing rebirth would follow. It did not. Horror swept the city. Jason, now stained by treachery, was driven into exile. They fled to Corinth. Years passed. From the outside, their life looked peaceful, but decay had already set in. Jason, forever hungry for legitimacy, abandoned Medea and sought marriage with a Corinthian princess. It was his final mistake. Medea sent the bride a gift, a robe woven with poison. When the woman put it on, flames consumed her. Then Medea killed her own children, not in madness, but in cold resolve. She left Jason with nothing. Not love, not legacy, not hope. She escaped in a chariot drawn by dragons, a gift from her grandfather, the sun god Helios. Jason remained behind, broken, forgotten. In old age, he wandered back to Iolcus. One day, resting beneath the rotting hull of the Argo, a beam fell loose and crushed his skull. Thus ended the great hero, not in battle, not in glory, but in silence, beneath the ruins of his own past. Yet his story endured. In the quest for the Golden Fleece, in the brotherhood of heroes, in ambition undone by betrayal, Greece found one of its most enduring warnings. Few bloodlines in Greek myth are darker than the royal house of Thebes. Where other heroes fought monsters, the Theban kings fought their own blood. It began with a search. Cadmus, a Phoenician prince and brother of Europa, set out to find her after Zeus carried her away in the shape of a white bull. When he failed, the oracle at Delphi told him to stop searching. Follow a cow. Where it lies down, build a city. Cadmus obeyed, but blood came first. His companions were slain by a serpent sacred to Ars. Cadmus killed the beast and, at Athena's command, sowed its teeth into the earth. From the soil rose armed men, the Spartoi, who slaughtered one another until only 5 remained. They became the founders of Thebes. But killing Ars' serpent demanded payment. Cadmus served the war god for years, then married Harmonia, daughter of Ars and Aphrodite. The gods attended their wedding. They gave gifts. One was a necklace forged by Hephaestus, beautiful, cursed, and fatal to all who wore it. The curse spread through generations. Madness, fire, dismemberment, and finally, it reached King Laos. An oracle warned him, if he had a son, that child would kill him and marry his wife. When the boy was born, Laos pierced his ankles and ordered him abandoned on a mountain. But mercy intervened. The child survived. He was raised in Corinth and named Oedipus, swollen foot. When he grew older, rumors led him to Delphi. There, the same prophecy was spoken. Believing his adoptive parents to be his true ones, he fled. Straight into fate. At a crossroads, he killed a stranger in a quarrel, his real father. In Thebes, he solved the riddle of the Sphinx and was crowned king. He married the widowed queen, his mother. Years later, plague revealed the truth. Jocasta hanged herself. Oedipus blinded himself and wandered the earth, guided only by his daughter Antigone. When he died, the ground swallowed him whole. But the curse lived on. His sons killed each other in war. Antigone was buried alive for honoring the dead. Thebes endured, but never healed. This was not a tale of monsters slain. It was a tale of fate, of how truth, once uncovered, can destroy the seeker. And beyond all these tragedies, the greatest war of myth was born. It began at a wedding. Every god was invited, except one. Eris, goddess of discord, hurled a golden apple onto the feast. Its inscription read, "To the fairest." Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite claimed it. To judge them, a mortal was chosen, Paris, a Trojan prince raised as a shepherd, abandoned because prophecy said he would destroy his city. Each goddess offered him a gift: power, victory, wisdom. Aphrodite offered love, the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chose her. And with that choice, Helen's name was written into destiny. The war was no longer avoidable. Helen had been pursued long before she was ever taken. In her youth, princes and kings came from every corner of Achaea, drawn not only by her beauty, but by the dangerous promise carried in her blood, a lineage that brushed against Olympus itself. Her mortal father, King Tyndareus of Sparta, feared what her marriage might unleash. He had seen enough of kings to know that desire, left unchecked, breeds war. At the council of Odysseus, the clever lord of Ithaca, Tyndareus devised a binding solution. All who sought Helen's hand would swear a sacred oath. Whoever won her, the rest would defend that marriage with sword and life. Any man who violated it would face them all. The pact was sealed in ritual and wine, with laughter and confidence. None of them understood what such an oath truly meant. Words spoken before the gods do not fade. They settle into fate. Menelaus, brother to Agamemnon of Mycenae, won Helen's hand. Together they ruled Sparta with measured justice, their halls strong, their people prosperous. For a time, the oath slept. Then Paris came. He arrived from Troy beneath the ancient law of guest friendship, welcomed into Menelaus' home under the protection of sacred custom. But Paris carried with him a promise whispered by Aphrodite herself. When he saw Helen, he believed destiny had placed her before him. Whether she left willingly or was taken by persuasion or force has never been settled. Poets argue. Gods remain silent. What is known is this: when Paris sailed back across the Aegean Sea, Helen was with him. In that moment, the war was already born. Menelaus' fury shook Sparta. He invoked the oath, and one by one, the kings of Greece answered. Odysseus came, unwilling but bound. Nestor of Pylos, ancient and wise. Ajax the greater, massive and unyielding. Ajax the lesser, swift and savage. Dions of Argos, burning for glory. Idomeneus of Crete, steady and loyal. From every shore and valley they gathered, rulers and warriors alike. Only two resisted. Odysseus feigned madness, plowing salt into his fields until his ruse was broken by a child placed before the blade. Achilles, son of the sea goddess Thetis, was hidden among the daughters of Lycomedes, dressed in silk to escape a fate his mother foresaw. But even fate can be baited. When weapons were laid among gifts of gold, Achilles reached for the spear. And the war claimed him. The host gathered at Aulis. 1,000 ships waited, their hulls dark against the shore. But the winds would not rise. Days passed. Tempers frayed. The seer cultures spoke at last. Artemis had been offended, and only blood would appease her. Not any blood, Agamemnon's daughter, Iphigenia. Some say she was lured with lies of marriage. Some say Artemis spared her at the final breath. But in most tellings, the knife fell, and a king sacrificed his child for victory. The gods watched. The winds came. The fleet sailed east, and the world crossed a line it could never return from. For 10 years, the Greeks camped beneath the walls of Troy, the city of Priam, whose towers were said to have been raised by gods. The Trojans endured behind stone and oath, led by Hector, prince, husband, father, and shield of the city. The gods chose sides. Hera, Athena, and Poseidon favored the Greeks. Aphrodite, Ars, Apollo, and Artemis stood with Troy. Zeus watched from above, pretending neutrality, yet bending beneath the weight of fate. By the 9th year, the war had rotted into routine. Raids replaced battles. Hunger gnawed. Pride kept both sides bound. Then came the quarrel that would fracture everything. Agamemnon and Achilles. A captive girl taken in war became the spark. When Agamemnon dishonored Apollo's priest and seized Briseis from Achilles, the greatest warrior of the age withdrew from battle. He swore the Greeks would bleed without him. And they did. Hector drove them back, ship by ship, flame licking at the hulls. Desperation followed. Patroclus, Achilles' closest companion, begged to fight in his armor. For a moment, the Greeks surged forward. Then Hector struck him down. Achilles' grief was not human. It was a storm given flesh. He returned to war clad in armor forged by Hephaestus himself, his shield bearing the story of the world. He slaughtered without mercy. He hunted Hector, and when he killed him, he denied him burial, dragging his body before Troy's walls. Only Priam, broken with age and sorrow, ended that rage. Guided by Hermes, the old king knelt before the man who had slain his son. Achilles wept. He returned Hector's body. For one night, the war breathed. It would not last. Achilles fell soon after, struck by an arrow guided by Apollo, finding the one place he could be wounded. And though Troy still stood, its fate was sealed. The war that began with an oath and a stolen bride would end with fire, deceit, and the silence of gods who had grown tired of watching men destroy one another in their names. The Iliad does not end with triumph, but with mourning, with a funeral, with enemies sharing grief beneath a quiet sky. Yet the war itself was not finished. The gods had not spoken their final word, and neither had the Greeks. The horse had not yet been built. The gates had not yet been opened from within. But the blood was already soaked deep into the earth, and the balance was beginning to tilt. 10 years of siege had hollowed the world. Warriors had become shadows of themselves. Kings walked like living memories of men they once were. Troy, once radiant, crouched behind its walls like an aging lion, scarred and surrounded. Priam's sons had fallen one by one. Hector, the city's living shield, lay dead at Achilles' hands. Young Troilus was cut down before his strength could mature. Polydorus was murdered through treachery rather than battle. Still, the Trojans fought on, not merely for stone and towers, but for ancestry, for songs yet unborn. And then, one morning, silence came. At dawn, the Trojans climbed their towers and saw an empty sea. No sails, no smoke. The Greek camp lay abandoned, its fires cold. Where the armies had stood for a decade, there remained only a single object upon the plain before the Scaean gate, a colossal wooden horse, towering like a temple, its body fashioned from smooth cedar planks, its maner carved as an offering to Poseidon. Confusion replaced fear. Had the Greeks truly gone? Priam hesitated. Age had taught him caution. Others urged restraint. But it was Sinon, a lone Greek left behind, who sealed Troy's fate. Bound and bleeding, he claimed to be a deserter, sacrificed by his own people. With a voice practiced in deceit, he told a tale worthy of Odysseus himself. The horse, he said, was a gift to Athena, meant to ensure the Greeks' safe return. Too large to fit through Troy's gates, it was built that way on purpose. If the Trojans destroyed it, the goddess would turn against them. If they brought it inside their walls, Troy would inherit her favor. Only Laocoon, priest of Poseidon, spoke plainly. Beware of Greeks bearing gifts. He hurled his spear into the horse's flank. The wood shuddered. A hollow echo answered. For a moment, truth hung in the air. Then the gods intervened. From the sea rose two monstrous serpents, their coils vast, their eyes burning. They crushed Laocoon and his sons in a single, merciless embrace. The crowd gasped. Fear twisted into belief. Surely this was punishment for doubting the gods. The horse was dragged into the city with ropes and wheels, amid hymns and celebration. Troy, exhausted by war, chose hope over caution. That night, wine flowed. Fires burned low. Songs rose into the dark. And from the belly of the horse, the trapdoor opened. Out slipped Odysseus, Menelaus, Dionysus, Noctivara, the son of Achilles, and others chosen not for mercy, but for precision. At the same hour, the Greek fleet returned from its hiding place behind Tenedos, gliding toward shore beneath a moonless sky. What followed was not battle. It was annihilation. Neoptolemus stormed Priam's palace like a living curse. He slaughtered the old king at the altar of Zeus, staining sacred stone with blood. Cassandra, daughter of Priam and cursed prophetess, was dragged from Athena's temple, screaming truths no one would ever heed. Hecuba watched her city burn, her children die, and her world collapse into ash. No mercy was given. Astyanax, Hector's infant son, was hurled from the walls so Troy might never rise again. Temples were defiled. Women were taken. The city that had defied 10 years of siege fell in a single night. Helen was found in the palace. Some say she begged. Others say she stood untouched, calm as stone. Menelaus raised his sword, then lowered it. Whatever love or weariness stayed his hand, Helen returned with him to Sparta, and the war claimed its final prize. At dawn, Troy was smoke. But victory carried curses. Ajax the Lesser, who violated Cassandra in Athena's temple, was drowned by Poseidon's wrath. Agamemnon returned home with Cassandra at his side, only to be murdered in his bath by his wife Clytemnestra, who had never forgiven the sacrifice of their daughter. The house of Atreus continued its long tradition of blood answering blood. Menelaus and Helen wandered before reaching Sparta, driven by hostile winds to Egypt. Some stories claim the true Helen had never gone to Troy at all, that the war had been fought for a phantom. Others say Menelaus forgave her because peace mattered more than truth. They ruled again, but Sparta would never shine as it once had. Dionysus, Nestor, and many others faded into exile, obscurity, or quiet death. Only Aeneas escaped Troy with destiny intact. Carrying his father on his back and leading his son by the hand, he fled westward, guided by omens. From his line, the Romans would later claim descent, and from Troy's ashes, another empire would rise. The fall of Troy was not merely the end of a city. It was the end of the heroic age, when men dined with gods, when glory outweighed mercy, and fate was carved into flesh. Yet the story did not end there. For those who survived, the journey home would prove more cruel than the war itself. Odysseus, architect of Troy's destruction, was cursed by Poseidon to wander the seas for 10 long years. Shipwrecked, tempted, hunted, and tested, he would face cyclopes, sorceresses, sirens, and the dead themselves. His Odyssey would become a legend of wit, endurance, and loss. The winds that once carried heroes to war now scattered them across the world, indifferent to victory. And so the ashes of Troy drifted out to sea, carried by winds that did not care who had won. He passed between Scylla and Charybdis, where death waited in stone and water alike. Storms claimed his fleet. Hunger claimed his men. Pride and foolish courage finished the rest. At last, broken and alone, he washed ashore upon the land of the Phaeacians. Moved by his suffering and the long thread of his tale, they offered him hospitality, a ship, and safe passage home. When Odysseus returned to Ithaca, he came not as a king, but as a shadow. His clothes were rags. His beard hung wild upon his chest. His eyes, once sharp with laughter, were hardened by years of loss. In his halls, uninvited men feasted and schemed, devouring his wealth and pressing his wife to choose a new husband. Penelope endured them all, buying time with quiet defiance, weaving by day and undoing her work by night, faithful to a man the world believed long dead. With the help of his son Telemachus, his loyal swineherd Eumaeus, and the bow no other man could bend, Odysseus revealed himself. One by one, the suitors fell. The great hall ran red. Order returned, but peace, as ever, was fleeting. The war had ended, but its echo lingered in every home. Many heroes fared worse. Ajax the Lesser, defiler of Athena's temple, was struck down at sea by the goddess he had offended. Dionysus returned to find betrayal waiting in his palace. Driven from his city, he wandered west and founded settlements that would fade into half-remembered names. Philoctetes, who had slain Paris with Heracles' bow, found no welcome among his own and lived out his days in isolation. Neoptolemus, son of Achilles, met his end at Delphi, cut down near Apollo's altar, perhaps payment for the blood he had spilled in Troy. The Trojan War had promised eternal glory. It delivered only ashes. The heroes who once stood shoulder to shoulder beneath Ilium's walls returned to broken marriages, hostile gods, and songs that no longer matched the truth. In the end, there were no victors, only those who survived long enough to carry the weight of memory. Yet before Troy ever stood, before ships touched the wine-dark sea or shields rang in battle, there existed a deeper power. Older than kings, older than war, the dominion of the gods. Their stories lie beneath mortal tales like bedrock beneath soil. Before Olympus, there was chaos. From chaos came Gaia and Uranus, earth and sky. From them came Cronus and the Titans, and from their violence, the first order of the cosmos was shaped. That age ended in thunder. Zeus, youngest of Cronus' sons, rose against his father, freed his swallowed siblings, and cast the Titans into Tartarus' black depths. From that victory rose the Olympians. Zeus claimed the sky, Poseidon the sea, Hades the underworld. Earth and Olympus were held in uneasy balance. Around them gathered a pantheon not gentler than what came before, but more intimate, gods who walked among mortals, meddled in their affairs, and mirrored human passions at divine scale. Zeus ruled from his high throne with thunder always near. He was not merely strong, but cunning in alliance and ruthless in punishment. Hera, his queen, governed marriage and birth, her authority matched only by her resentment. For Zeus' infidelities were endless, and from them came heroes and monsters alike, Heracles, Perseus, Minos, Helen, children who would reshape the world and provoke Hera's unrelenting wrath. Athena stood apart. Born from Zeus' own head, armored and whole, she embodied wisdom and disciplined war. She favored strategy over savagery, cities over chaos, and guided mortals who thought before they struck. Where Mars reveled in slaughter, Athena sought victory with restraint. Apollo and Artemis, children of Leto, brought balance of light and shadow. Apollo spoke through prophecy, song, and healing, yet could also loose plague upon armies. Artemis roamed untouched wilderness, protector of beasts and punisher of those who crossed her sacred bounds. Demeter guarded the harvest, and when her daughter Persephone was taken into the underworld, grief withered the land. From her sorrow came the seasons, an eternal rhythm of loss and return. Aphrodite ruled desire, born of sea foam and violence, binding gods and men alike to longing and ruin. Though wed to Hephaestus, she loved Ars, and in their union passion and war became inseparable. Hermes, swift and smiling, crossed all borders. Messenger, trickster, guide of souls, no realm was closed to him. Even Hades opened its gates at his passing. These gods were not distant creators. They interfered, favored, punished, and played out rivalries through mortal lives. Temples rose in their honor. Fires burned for Hestia in every home. Oracles whispered their will. Yet even they were not beyond fear. Zeus himself dreaded the fate of his father, abandoning his union with Thetis lest her child overthrow him. Achilles was allowed to be born mortal, destined for glory and an early grave. The age of heroes had faded, but the gods still ruled. And yet, beyond the marble temples and ordered rites, darker forces stirred. Gods of ecstasy and terror, of death and rebirth, worshipped not in open squares but in torchlit groves and hidden caves. Chief among them was Dionysus, the last to claim a seat on Olympus, and the most dangerous. Born of Zeus and the mortal Semele, Dionysus came into being through fire and defiance. When Semele demanded Zeus reveal his true form, she was consumed by lightning. Zeus saved the unborn child, sewing him into his own thigh. Thus Dionysus was born twice, belonging fully to neither god nor man. He did not rule from a throne. He wandered. Raised among nymphs, satyrs, and wild hills, he brought wine, music, and madness wherever he went. Vines grew. Order dissolved. Identity blurred. Dionysus was not merely joy, he was transformation, the sacred terror of losing oneself. When he came to Greece, he was not welcomed easily. And wherever Dionysus walked, reason trembled. Cities laughed at his claim to divinity. Kings denied him altars and rites. Wherever Dionysus was refused, punishment followed. Slowly, deliberately, he made the world remember who he was. In Thebes, the land of his mortal mother, the young god returned in disguise. His followers filled the streets with drums, chanting voices, and ecstatic cries that unsettled the order of the city. The king, Pentheus, stood rigid against the tide. He scorned the wild rites, jailed the god he did not recognize, and vowed to expose the women who fled to the mountains in Dionysian frenzy. But Dionysus does not confront resistance head-on. He dissolves it. He whispered madness into Pentheus' thoughts, dressed him in women's robes, and lured him into the forest to spy upon the revels. There, under the spell of divine ecstasy, Pentheus was no longer king, no longer man. His own mother, Agave, led the Maenads in tearing him apart, limb from limb, believing him a beast. Only when she returned to the city holding her son's head aloft did the madness fade, leaving horror in its wake. The lesson settled over Thebes like ash. Dionysus was not merely a god of wine. He was the god of masks, of theater, of transformation. Under his festivals, tragedy and comedy were born, ritual performances where Greeks explored terror, desire, guilt, and fate through story and song. To worship Dionysus was not to kneel in obedience, but to surrender control. With him came something new to the Greek world: mystery. The mystery cults did not reject Olympus, but they flowed beneath it, quiet and profound. In Eleusis, initiates reenacted Demeter's grief and Persephone's return, learning that death was not an ending but a passage. The Orphic spoke of Dionysus himself as a god torn apart and reborn, whose suffering offered release from the endless cycle of rebirth. These rites promised something the Olympian order never had: personal transformation, hope beyond the grave. And in that promise, the old certainty of the gods began to tremble. Even on Olympus, fractures widened. Mars and Athena clashed in spirit as well as war. Apollo loved too deeply and too destructively, leaving behind laurel trees, hyacinth flowers, and broken hearts. Aphrodite punished mortals for passions she herself inspired. The gods grew ever more human in their pride, jealousy, and wounds. In Dionysus, the Olympians found both reflection and threat. He wandered instead of reigning, elevated peasants and humbled kings, and taught mortals that divinity could be felt within the self. Not only in temples, but in breath, rhythm, and madness. Beyond the wine-dark seas, the world shifted. Rome stirred. New powers rose. And Olympus, for all its lightning and marble, felt the wind change along its heights. Yet the gods did not retreat quietly. They descended again and again into mortal lives, not only as punishers or patrons, but as lovers. From these unions came the demigods, children caught between worlds, never fully belonging to either. Foremost among them was Heracles. Born of Zeus and the mortal Alcmene through deception and stolen time, Heracles entered life already marked by Hera's hatred. While still an infant, he strangled the serpents she sent to kill him. He grew into a man of unmatched strength, but his true burden was suffering. Driven mad by divine cruelty, he slaughtered his own family. Crushed by guilt, he sought redemption and was condemned to 12 impossible labors. Each task forced him to confront death, chaos, and despair, the lion no blade could wound, the hydra whose heads multiplied, the underworld itself. Through pain and endurance, Heracles became something greater than a warrior. At his death, consumed by poisoned fire, he ascended to Olympus, the only mortal to earn godhood through suffering. Others followed similar paths. Perseus, born of Zeus and Danae, was cast to sea and survived by fate's mercy. Armed by gods, he slew Medusa without meeting her gaze, rescued Andromeda, and founded royal bloodlines that would shape history. His descendants would lead to Heracles himself, binding hero to hero through destiny. There was Theseus, slayer of the Minotaur, who brought order to Athens. Bellerophon, who rode Pegasus and fell for daring too high. Atalanta, swift as the wind, raised by bears, undone not by strength but by love. The demigods were never granted peace. Their blood burned too bright. They suffered, failed, and died, but through their struggles, they achieved a different immortality, not of flesh, but of story. As Troy's ashes cooled and generations passed, it was not the gods alone who endured, but the tales of those who walked between heaven and earth. Their lives became mirrors for humanity, flawed, courageous, doomed, and luminous. And beneath gods and heroes alike, there was something older still. Fate. Not a god, though gods feared it. Not a law, though it bound all things. Fate was the silent gravity of the universe, woven into every birth and death. The Greeks called it Moira. Sometimes she was one force, sometimes three, the spinners, measurers, and cutters of life's thread. Even Zeus could not command her. And it was fate, patient and unseen, who waited at the end of every myth. Three sisters stood at the heart of all existence, older than gods, quieter than thunder. They were the Fates. One spun the thread of life into being. Another measured its length with calm precision. And the last, unyielding, irreversible, cut it when the moment arrived. Clotho spun. Lachesis measured. Atropos ended. Even Zeus, ruler of Olympus, could not command them. He might rage, bargain, or plead, but when Atropos lifted her shears, no force in heaven or earth could stay her hand. The gods themselves lived beneath the shadow of that certainty. And if fate ruled all things, what hope did mortals have? The Greeks believed the answer lay not in defiance, but in understanding. Fate could not be altered, but it might be glimpsed. To see what waited ahead was not to escape it, but to prepare the soul to endure it. Thus arose the language of omens and oracles, the subtle signs through which the gods whispered fragments of what was already decided. The most revered oracle in all Greece stood at Delphi. There, Apollo spoke through the Pythia, a woman seated upon a tripod above a fissure in the stone. Vapors rose from the earth. She breathed them in, slipped into trance, and uttered the gods' words in broken phrases and riddles. Kings, generals, merchants, and shepherds all came to her. Some sought conquest. Others simply wished to survive. But Apollo never spoke plainly. Prophecy, like a blade, cut in more than one direction. Croesus, king of Lydia, once asked whether he should wage war against Persia. The oracle replied that if he crossed the river, a great empire would fall. Encouraged, he marched, only to discover that the empire destroyed was his own. Oedipus was told he would kill his father and marry his mother. His parents tried to outrun fate by abandoning him. He himself fled the home he believed was his own. Every step meant to escape the prophecy carried him closer to its fulfillment. The oracle had not lied. It was human misunderstanding that sealed the tragedy. There were other sacred voices as well. At Dodona, Zeus spoke through the rustling leaves of ancient oak trees. At Delos, birthplace of Apollo and Artemis, divine will echoed through song and ritual. In Libya, at the shrine of Ammon, and in countless smaller sanctuaries, signs emerged through dreams, flames, entrails, birds in flight, and sudden silences heavy with meaning. Before battles, omens were read with trembling care. A flash of lightning, a crow's cry, a stumble at the wrong moment, none were dismissed as chance. To ignore a sign was to invite not just defeat, but divine punishment. Seers studied the livers of oxen, the patterns of blood and muscle, reading intention in dark flesh. Prophets held power equal to kings. Cultures guided the Greeks at Troy. Tiresias, blind yet seeing, walked between worlds. Having lived as both man and woman, touched by gods and cursed by truth, he carried wisdom so heavy that few wished to hear it. Prophecy was not power. It was awareness. And awareness, arriving too late, often looked no different from despair. Still, mortals climbed the mountain paths to Delphi. They brought gold, wine, and sacrifice. They asked their questions in quiet voices, knowing the answers might ruin them. For even if fate could not be changed, it could be faced. To know the storm was coming was not to stop it, but perhaps to stand unflinching beneath it. In this tension between knowledge and helplessness, the Greeks found meaning. Their stories were not about triumph over destiny, but dignity within it. Hector knew he would die, and still fastened his armor. Achilles knew he would never return, and still sailed for Troy. Oedipus fled his doom and ran straight into its arms. And year after year, the Pythia breathed the earth's fumes and whispered riddles to a world already written. Death, to the Greeks, was not the end of the story, only the end of breath. Beyond it lay no heaven or hell as later ages would imagine, but something older and quieter. A realm beneath the earth where all souls traveled, noble and cruel alike. This place was Hades, named for its ruler, a god so feared that mortals rarely spoke his name. Instead, they called him Plauton, the wealthy one, for all riches, all gold and silver veins, came from below the ground, as did the dead. The underworld followed the logic of myth, not geography. At its borders flowed 5 rivers. Styx, of sacred oaths and hatred. Akron, of sorrow. Phlegethon, burning with fire. Cocytus, the river of lamentation. And Lethe, whose waters erased memory itself. Souls arrived as shadows, thin, voiceless echoes of who they once were. Charon, the ferryman, carried them across Akron for a coin. Those denied proper burial wandered the banks for 100 years, whispering in grief. Cerberus stood guard at the gates, his 3 heads ensuring the dead never returned and the living never entered. Beyond lay the fields of asphodel, grey and dim, where most souls drifted in gentle forgetfulness. Yet judgment awaited. Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus weighed each life. The wicked fell into Tartarus, a pit deeper than the Titan's prison, where punishments mirrored crimes. Sisyphus pushed his stone. Tantalus starved beside unreachable water. Ixion spun endlessly upon his wheel. The blessed few reached the Elysian fields, a land of soft winds and eternal spring. Some, in later mysteries, were allowed rebirth. Others hoped to escape the cycle entirely and rise beyond the stars. At the center of it all ruled Hades himself, silent, stern, unchanging. He did not tempt mortals or crave devotion. He simply governed what all must one day enter. He was not evil, but inevitable. Beside him stood Persephone. Once a maiden of spring, daughter of Demeter, she was taken into the underworld when the earth split open beneath her feet. Demeter's grief withered the world. Crops failed. Hunger spread. Only when Zeus intervened was Persephone allowed to return, but because she had eaten the seeds of a pomegranate, she was bound to Hades for part of each year. Thus the seasons were born. Over time, Persephone became more than a captive. She became queen, keeper of mysteries, guide of souls. In the Eleusinian rites, her descent and return promised not only the rebirth of grain, but hope for the soul itself. A few mortals dared enter this realm and return. Orpheus sang his way past Cerberus, softened even the hearts of Hades and Persephone, and was granted the return of Eurydice, only to lose her forever with a single backward glance. Such were the lessons of the Greek world. Fate could not be escaped. Death could not be denied. But within their shadow, meaning could still be shaped. And in the quiet between heartbeats, the fates continued their work, spinning, measuring, and cutting, unmoved by prayer, yet endlessly giving rise to story. Heracles once dragged Cerberus himself into the daylight, the 3-headed hound howling beneath the sun. Odysseus, guided by Circe, sailed to the edge of the world, poured blood into the earth, and called the dead to speak. From the darkness rose the shades of Tiresias, Achilles, and Agamemnon. None spoke of glory. They spoke of loss. Achilles, once the mightiest of all Greeks, confessed that death held no triumph. Better, he said, to live as a nameless servant under the sun than to reign as a king among shadows. Power, fame, victory, none of it crossed the threshold intact. And so the Greeks honored their dead with care. They buried coins for Charon, weapons for memory, wine for comfort. They sang songs at graves and poured libations at the hearth. For the dead were never entirely gone. They returned in dreams, lingered in omens, and sometimes, through ritual and blood, were called back to answer questions that should have remained unasked. The underworld was not a place of reward or punishment in the later sense. It was a reflection of life, of memory, of justice without appeal. Vast, shadowed, impartial. Ruled by a god who did not crave love or prayer, only order and silence. In that silence, the Greeks glimpsed eternity. And yet even the gods themselves were not eternal. Not in memory, not in power, not in reverence. Every mythic age reaches a moment when divinity grows quiet, when once living figures fade from the edges of human imagination, and thrones built on thunder are worn smooth by time. For the Olympians, that retreat did not begin with war or prophecy, but with Rome, and with a world restless beneath the weight of old stories. The Romans did not destroy the Greek gods. They absorbed them. Zeus became Jupiter. Hera became Juno. Poseidon became Neptune. The transformation was deliberate, respectful, and deeply political. Rome admired Olympus, but reshaped it to reflect Roman values, law, hierarchy, empire. Jupiter no longer ruled from a wild mountain, but from the Capitoline hill, clothed as a lawgiver rather than a storm. Dionysus lost his dangerous ecstasy and emerged as Bacchus, cultured and controlled. Athena's sharp independence softened into Minerva's civic reason. The gods endured, but altered, disciplined into symbols of state rather than forces of nature. In literature, the myths lived on. Ovid retold them in polished Latin, rich with irony and transformation. Virgil cast the gods as distant architects of destiny, guiding Rome's founding rather than brawling on dusty battlefields. Something essential had shifted. In Homer, the gods bled, lusted, raged, and fought beside men. In Rome, they became abstractions, moral forces, political metaphors, divine themes rather than presences. As the empire expanded, new gods arrived. From the east came Mithras, born of stone, slayer of the cosmic bull. From Egypt came Isis, mother of magic and resurrection, wrapped in mystery. From Judea came a singular, invisible god, one without image or equal, who rejected idols and thunder-wielding kings alike. These faiths did more than compete with Olympus. They undermined its foundations. Where the Olympians ruled through appetite and hierarchy, the new religions offered moral clarity, unity, and salvation. At the same time, philosophy eroded myth from within. Xenophanes mocked gods shaped like men. Plato admired myth but doubted its literal truth, insisting that divinity must be perfect, not jealous or cruel. Epicurus argued that the gods, if they existed, were indifferent to human affairs. The Stoics saw divinity not as beings, but as reason itself, the logos governing all things. By the time emperors were declared divine and altars raised to mortal rulers, the line between faith and power had all but dissolved. The old gods became symbols. Their temples remained, but belief thinned. Farmers still prayed to Demeter. Sailors still called to Poseidon. Yet fewer believed the gods truly walked among them. The flame of Olympus had not gone out, but it burned low. Then came the final turning. Christianity, once a persecuted sect, spread across the empire. Its God was unseen, singular, absolute. Its stories were not of divine rivalries, but of sin, sacrifice, and redemption. Gradually, its churches replaced the old sanctuaries. Its hymns drowned out the ancient prayers. Under Theodosius I, pagan temples were closed. Sacrifices were outlawed. The Olympic Games were ended. There was no final war between Zeus and Christ. No last stand of the gods. They simply faded. Statues weathered. Altars grew cold. Marble cracked. Ivy climbed the columns where priests once stood. The myth survived, but as literature, not belief. Children learned of heracles in schools, not shrines. Artists painted Athena, but no longer prayed to her. And yet the gods did not vanish. They endured as echoes, in poetry, in art, in the architecture of the Western imagination. They returned in Renaissance paintings and Enlightenment debates, in romantic tragedy and modern retellings. They became archetypes: war and wisdom, love and betrayal, pride and downfall. The Greeks had given the gods human faces. In doing so, they made them immortal in a different way. During centuries of Christian dominance, monks copied Homer and Hesiod, preserving stories they no longer worshipped. The myths waited in libraries, between sermons and treatises, dormant but intact. Then the Renaissance looked backward to move forward. Aphrodite rose again on canvas. Apollo reclaimed his grace in marble. Poets invoked the muses once more. The gods no longer ruled the sky, but they reigned in art. The Enlightenment dissected them. Romanticism embraced their tragedy. The modern age reimagined them. Psychologists saw archetypes. Novelists wove them into cities and dreams. Cinema dressed them in armor and light. Odysseus still sails. Heracles still labors. Persephone still rises each spring. Myth does not die. It changes language. It changes shape. It waits. What the Greeks left behind was not merely a pantheon, but a way of seeing, a framework for confronting death, honoring beauty, and understanding the self. And as long as stories are told in the quiet hours of the night, the gods, in some form, will always find their way back. Their gods were flawed, gloriously so. In them, humanity saw not perfection, but possibility, the agony of choice, the thrill of risk, the wound of hubris, the solace of ritual. They did not show us what it meant to be divine. They showed us what it meant to be human. Through them, the Greeks explored what we might become and what we must fear. Even now, in a world of science and silence, the myths still murmur. You hear them in stories of chosen heroes and fallen stars, in the slow turning of the seasons. A girl descends, and spring waits. A king defies prophecy and loses everything. A mother grieves, and the sun itself seems dimmer. The names change. The faces shift. But the truths endure. The gods may have left Olympus, but they never truly left us. They walk quietly now, in books and songs, in dreams and memory, in every story that dares to reach beyond the mortal veil. They are not dead. They have simply moved. And now the story ends. The winds on Mount Olympus are cold. The torches at Delphi have burned to ash. The oracles are silent. But the myths remain. Good night.